Thank you for joining us today on Earth File. Welcome to the program. I'm Ayola Kasim. A $500 million commitment to developing agriculture opportunities for young Africans, a deal room that delivered some $200 million in new investment, billions to support digital infrastructure, crucial for powering innovative farmer services, are some of the highlights of the 2019 African Green Revolution Forum, which held in the first week of September in Accra, Ghana. Some 2,800 participants from across Africa and around the world attended a three-day event with the theme Grow Digital. Today on Earth File, we'll bring to you some of the activities that shaped 2019 AGRF. Just stay with us. The African Green Revolution Forum has been known as the world's premier forum for African agriculture, pulling together stakeholders across the agricultural landscape to discuss and commit to programs, investments and policies to achieve an inclusive and sustainable agricultural transformation across the continent. This year, the event returned to Ghana, the host of the first AGRF in 2010. Ghana is also the home of former United Nations Secretary General, late Kofi Annan, who was the founder of both the AGRF and the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. Mr. Annan was a leading voice for the power of smallholder farmers to drive major reductions in poverty across the continent.
The whole idea about AGRF is to bring everybody who cares about African agriculture as a basis of development for this continent to come together to discuss the development we want to see and the progress we want to hold ourselves accountable to. So we are happy to be here in Ghana this year. Again, 10 years after the AGRF started. It's exactly 1 year since Kofi Annan passed away. And we thought that in recognizing that, but also recognizing that individuals make a difference, that we should be here to remember that moment and to recognize the work that he started on behalf of all of us, the continent. He was very passionate about the fact that Africa was left behind at the time. Africa still is ways behind everybody else. And his logic was, why are we behind and what do we need to do differently? And the whole idea of talking about technologies and how they come together to help Africa move fast and advance towards where everybody else is what he was pursuing. Today we are lucky that we are talking about digitization because it's a new way of doing business that we are seeing that Mr. Kofi Annan didn't see when he was growing up. We have an opportunity to leapfrog into the future. We have an opportunity to catch up with where everybody else is using digitization.
Agriculture in Africa has a massive social and economic footprint. More than 60% of the population of sub-Saharan Africa is smallholder farmers, and about 23% of sub-Saharan Africa's GDP comes from agriculture. Yet, Africa's full agricultural potential remains untapped. Experts believe Africa could be 2 or 3 times more productive if it intensified its productivity and leveraged technology to redefine the future of its agriculture.
Africa can take advantage of what has already taken place, the advances. So there is no need for reinventing the wheel. The technology is available. Experiences exist elsewhere as to how it was used, how it has helped, but also what challenges may have been. So based on this, Africa can take as an opportunity to now the other window of the leapfrogging is because we're lagging behind in terms of productivity, in terms of many things. So we can facilitate mutual learning and experience towards making advance in this area. One aspect of this is many reports indicate that women are dominant in agriculture production in Africa. And just relating to the questions that was posed, why is it that women are not very fast in terms of uptaking these technologies? This is an area of leapfrogging. If we can really focus on this aspect to empower women for them to be able to adopt this technology, use it for their benefit, it means there is going to be opportunities and possibilities for leapfrogging.
The African Green Revolution Forum, therefore, provides the platform for global and African leaders to develop actionable plans that will move agriculture forward on the continent.
I welcome you today.
The organizers believe the digital era offers many new innovations and breakthroughs that will allow the African continent to get ahead of the curve and more efficiently and sustainably unlock the full potential of its smallholder farmers and the agribusiness sector.
In 2030, according to President Obasanjo, who said that is when we will decide whether or not we deliver the green revolution on the continent of Africa. So all I can say is we have some interesting green shoots on the ground. There is a momentum which I see in this room. There is an energy amongst the youth who are saying, we don't need a handout, we just need a hand up. Just show us what to do and we will do it. They're not wanting to cross the Sahara and the Mediterranean, Your Excellencies. They want to develop their continent and they need us to help them.
First, the 2019 AGRF featured the launch of a provocative new report that burst a major myth of Africa agriculture, that there is a missing middle of small and medium-sized enterprises available to power the region's food systems. The AGRF's 2019 Africa Agricultural Status Report presented new evidence that what is called the missing middle is actually a hidden middle of SME-powered agri-food supply chains that recently has experienced a quiet revolution.
If indeed the African food system is broken, then we're in big trouble. So we started this year in this African Agricultural Status Report digging into the empirical evidence in surveys and in secondary data to understand what is the development of the private sector in output and input supply chains in Africa. And we found a big surprise. That surprise contradicted the conventional wisdom, busted the myth of a broken African food system. Yes, we found that the African food system development is constrained by poor infrastructure, constrained by inconsistent policies, etc., that are holding it back from its full potential. In the words of my friend Ousmane Badiane, who thinks of the private sector as having taken off, but it's not flying at its full potential level. So it is constrained. But despite the constraints, we found extremely rapid, even very sudden development of the food system in Africa in the past 2 decades, and therefore it hasn't yet penetrated the conventional wisdom. In particular, we found what we call a quiet revolution at the grassroots level in African supply chains, in the hidden middle, that is, in the segments that are closest to and serving the farmer, the agro-dealers, the truckers, the processors, the wholesalers, the street vendors. These are the actors that are proliferating in their thousands and even their millions to create a quiet revolution in supply chains in Africa.
The report found that today, millions of SMEs are sourcing directly from millions more smallholder farmers across sub-Saharan Africa, accounting for 64% of the volume of food consumed in the region. Overall, only about 20% of the volume of food consumed in Africa fits the conventional notion of subsistence agriculture, that is, food consumed directly by the farming households that grow it. The majority of what Africans eat flows through what are known as private sector value chains, managed by SME businesses that purchase commodities directly from smallholder farmers, then process, package, transport, and sell food products to the urban and rural consumers.
25 years ago, African farmers grew what they ate and ate what they grew. It was a subsistence farm economy. Today, 50% of the total food basket of rural Africa is purchased. That means it's also coming in supply chains. All of this means that supply chains of the private sector, because the state is not supplying the food, are feeding 80% of Africa, because 80% of African food is purchased. So think about that. Our subject of private sector is now 80% of the food in Africa. I think that's important. 20% is the share still left to subsistence, where they just grow what they eat and they eat what they grow. 20%. It was the opposite 30 years ago.
The report says that the rise of SMEs has been largely unrecognized by policymakers, even as it has bridged gaps that previously separated most small-scale farmers from commercial markets. Rapid growth in digital innovations and an inclusive agricultural transformation have been at the heart of Africa's sustained economic growth witnessed in the past 2 decades. The continent's economy grew by 35% between 2000 and 2014.
We simply found that the African food system is growing extremely quickly. It's not broken, it's not stuck in the mud. Think about this. From 1970 to now, the total volume of food in Africa has grown by a factor of 350%, the same as in Asia. And what we found throughout our work is that everybody said Asia's a success story, Africa is a failure story, when instead we found parallel, the same story in the two places of dynamism. Also, in terms of growth over 25 years, there's been an 800% increase in the volume of food moved from rural areas to African cities. Is that a broken value chain? Is that a food system stuck in the mud? Think about it. A private sector business growing 800% in a couple decades. This is real success.
Today, across the continent, evidence exists of farmers that are embracing smart farming by applying digital technologies. The digital era offers many new innovations and breakthroughs that will allow the African continent to get ahead of the curve and more efficiently and sustainably unlock the full potential of the smallholder farmers and agribusiness sector. On its part, the Technical Center for Agricultural and Rural Cooperation, in partnership with Dalberg Advisors, presented the Digitalization of African Agriculture report. Its key findings include the fact that some 71% of users of digital agriculture, or what is known as D4Ag services, across the continent are under 35. The CTA report found more than 90% of the market for digital services that support African smallholders remains untapped and could be worth more than $2.26 billion.
So if you looked at this 5 years ago, let's say, you would see a lot of companies that were earning $5 to $10 in revenue per farmer per year, mostly with advisory solutions. Today, those numbers look more like $20 to $50 of earned revenue per year for market linkage solutions. And we're seeing several companies that are earning over $100 in revenue per farmer client per year, which begins to get to very meaningful economics.
The study also found nearly 400 different digital agriculture solutions are currently in play, serving 33 million registered farmers across sub-Saharan Africa.
But the key thing is that registration doesn't mean actual use. We found that many of these farmers maybe have been registered, but they are not actually always using these services. So we estimate that maybe about 40% of these farmers are actually using these services. So we also looked at a range of what we call use cases, what are the different kinds of services that are farmers being registered for. So we found that the most popular service is extension advisory services, where majority of farmers are registered for, but we also have market access solutions, supply chain management, and access to finance. But a number of solutions are now becoming what we call bundled services, because they are providing more than just one kind of service. So they are combining extension with market linkages, with financial services, and so on.
The report estimates the number of registered farmers and the number of digital solutions are growing so rapidly that they are likely to reach the majority of the region's farmers by 2030. A prime example of the surge of agribusiness endeavors in Africa can be found in the rapidly growing world of digitally enabled agriculture services, which are proving particularly popular among younger Africans. The 2019 AGRF featured a rigorous and informative series of technical assessment, policy analysis, and political discussions that produced a new level of consensus that could dramatically accelerate efforts to use digital innovations to make farming in Africa more productive, profitable, sustainable, and inclusive.
Yemi Osibajo, the Vice President of Nigeria, to join on the stage for the panel as well.
At the presidential summit, moderated by the Right Honourable Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, African leaders discussed the different ways digital technology is becoming a fixture of the African farming landscape.
Without Nigeria succeeding, Africa it finds it hard to succeed. So agriculture, how big is it as a priority for you in the program that yourself and the President have set forth for Nigeria? And give me a sense of this, because one of the things I always found really difficult as a political leader is how you bring in the best ideas from outside. In terms of the sort of digital transformation, how much do you feel your system is able to absorb the possibilities of that and turn it into something positive?
With respect to the place of agriculture in our economy, it is central. As a matter of fact, it is clearly the largest employer of labor. So there is no question at all as to its place. But just going on quickly to the question of how digital technology has, how we've absorbed digital technology, I think one of the most unique features of what digital technology has done is that it's brought in a large number of very young people. I mean, before the digital revolution, agriculture simply wasn't considered sexy enough. Today, loads of young people are now in agriculture, especially coming from using digital technology. Most of the digital platforms that we have that service the agricultural sector are of course owned and run by very young people who increasingly see the possibilities in agriculture. Is connect farmers to investors online, digitally, so that you're able to be an armchair farmer investing all over the country and able to see your dividends coming in. So there's a fair amount of money that's coming into agriculture on account of technology, aside from, of course, the various uses of technology for purposes of tracking, for purposes of tracking where movement of farm products, for purposes of extension services, and all of the other advantages. But I think one of the most important advantages is the fact that young people are now very interested in agriculture. They're investing in agriculture, and they're looking at the innumerable possibilities in the entire agro-allied value chain.
President Akufo-Addo said technology is defining future food security and that it is imperative Africa leveraged the digital revolution to make it the time for agricultural transformation across the continent.
We have therefore to make the arrangements that would enable us to penetrate the markets of the world. Our own community that we're looking at developing, of course, is going to be in itself a huge market. We're looking at our 1.2 billion people today as within those that will be taken in initially in the Continental Free Trade Area. The figures tell us that by 2015 we'll be looking at 2.5 billion people as that market. So that in itself is huge. But then there are the markets of Asia, of Europe, of America, which we have to find a way of being able to connect up to. So those alliances are yet to be firmed up formally, especially in the wake of what we're doing with the African trade area, how there is going to link up with the European Union, with ASEAN, with the remodeled NAFTA, what arrangements are going to be put in place to facilitate trade between us and them. But those are the partnerships that are going to be critical for us, as well as being able to have access to whatever is being developed in the technology space. And I think that there, too, we're going to have to be very strategic in the alliances and the partnerships that we make to get the technologies that are going to be able to assist us in our particular circumstances, how to develop and improve our agriculture. So there's a lot of work to be done in this area, but work that could be very, very positive and very, very beneficial. I think that our first priority at the moment is to make sure that the production centers that we want to become are efficient in the way in which they operate. And then on that, we build the superstructure that has to do with the alliances within the global community. That I'd like to see a situation whereby we play down the development assistance model of our development, and we look much more to a market-driven process of development for us and for the world.
Private and public sector stakeholders executed commitments worth over $200 million to develop and strengthen several value chains in Malawi, Mozambique, Nigeria, and Uganda. Some 17 country delegations presented investment opportunities worth in excess of $2 billion. The proposed investment, coupled with support from various stakeholders, is anticipated to impact more than 15,000 smallholder farmers and create 7 million jobs.
Ghana itself was able to plant 200,000 trees. When we first discussed, they were like, oh, we'll do 10,000. And we were able to do, we challenged ourselves and were able to do 200,000 trees in the first few days of this conference. The 200,000 is immaterial. What is really important here is the fact that we all recognize the need to engage better on how we use and how we reconstitute our continent with regards to forests, with regards to our environments, and with regards to ecosystem services and the value of ecosystem services. So being able to recognize that this is a huge part of our ecosystem services is extremely important.
Thank you very much.
And after more than 10 years, at the helm of the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, Strive Masiyiwa stepped down, but not without assuring all that the African Green Revolution will be delivered by 2030, even as projected, saying Africa will attain food security and set a platform to be the food basket of the world. Mr. Masiyiwa believes the tools are there and the will is growing.
Kofi Annan, addressing us at our first board meeting, said, I know that you big guys, if we gave you the right incentives, you can go out and you can produce all the food we want. He said, but that's not the way this is going to be done. The African Green Revolution will be delivered successfully through the African smallholder farmer. No matter where we are, when we are gathered here, we must not forget that it is about the African smallholder farmer. It is about improving their livelihoods, helping them to live dignified lives for which they earn a living and increase in their prosperity through their work as farmers.
Mr. Masiyiwa handed over to former Ethiopian Prime Minister Haile Desalegn. We wish the two of them good success. That's our program for the day. Thank you for watching. Our inbox file@channelstv.com is available for your comments and questions. You may also view this episode and other episodes of the program by visiting our YouTube channel, youtube.com/channelsweb. Do click the playlist menu and then click File. From me, Ayola Kasim, and the File crew here in Lagos. It's bye for now.